This is David Astle on ABC Radio Melbourne and Victoria.
Now, there are some things that are sacred, and one is that when it comes to a barbecue, there's got to be some snags available. Another thing is that if you're going down to the beach, you've got to slip, slop, slap. And another sacred institution that you may not be aware of in the Australian culture is that when a film is released, there is a thing called a 90-day window. And that 90-day is essentially an embargo that prevents that film being available on a streaming service. Until along comes a project called The Irishman, a passion project by a director called Martin Scorsese. This is a film that stars Robert De Niro, Al Pacino and Joe Pesci. You may have heard of these gentlemen. The film is set to monster the cinema. However, there is a real standoff with cinema operators because suddenly that 90-day window has downsized to a 30-day window. To talk about the implications of that decision and one of those sacred pillars of society suddenly eroding, I'm now joined by Tony Nikolakopoulos, who is, you will know him from many such projects, whether it's The Wog Boy or Dr. Blake, Blue Healers, Sea Change, and also Tony, interestingly, is involved in a production house that is playing between these two spaces. He joins me now. Welcome, Tony.
Hello, David. How are you?
Good. Now, this Irishman seems to break all the rules. Ironically, it is about a mobster who breaks his own rules. But why is this film suddenly shattered this window?
Well, it's only in Australia that it shows the window. It's accepted. The deal's been accepted in other territories. In other countries. Mm-hmm. But the way that the online streamers are working, where they've paid and developed the film, giving it a cinema release allows it to be eligible for all the awards, like the Oscars and so forth, because it needs a cinema release for that. But it's also obviously that Netflix have decided we're paying for it. We'll give it a cinema release, but then we want it online for our consumers because that's what they need to be doing. They need to be providing for their consumers because they're paying their monthly subscriptions to have access to, the latest films or new releases, films of interest. So it makes total sense.
It does make total sense. So why is it causing such ruckus? I mean, ultimately, that's Netflix is backing it, and Netflix, has a right to eventually share it or show it. Why is it causing such friction?
I think. Look, and it's purely opinionated from conversations that I've had. With other people in the industry, it's almost like the cinema now is obviously feeling the pinch of all the online platforms, mm-hmm. and what they're providing is really catering for what a lot of people want, which is to watch what they want, when they want, how they want. Whereas if you go to the cinema, you're restricted by certain times, and you've got to drive, you've got to park, you've got to deal with loads of people. Yeah,
it's true. And also the chip, let's not forget the chip cruncher right about 2 rows behind you.
Yeah, that's right. And there's all that. And people work different shifts, or they've got, they've got various things that are going on in their life, and they want to see a film when they're ready to see it, and I think, The Irishman will obviously do well if they do take the 30-day window. I think it'll do well in the cinema, and they'll all make money from the lollies and popcorn and ticket sales. But then, Netflix have to get their investment returned as well.
Could it be argued, Tony, that by reducing the window, that it creates a greater demand on the product? I mean, if I know that I can only got a month essentially to see The Irishman on a large screen, then I'd best be quick.
And if you want to see it on the big screen.
Yeah.
If that's what you want and that's where you're comfortable and you love that big screen experience, you'll go out of your way to make sure that you get tickets to see it. And other people, will say, look, I'll wait until it's on Netflix. I'm happy to see it. And then there's others that will watch it on the big screen and then want to watch it in the comfort of their own, TV, tablet, movie theatre. I think we just got to accept that things have changed. We're not. The generation that's under 30, they've got a different way that they like to experience things. And the cinema experience, they're not as invested emotionally as they're saying, people over 40, 50. Cinema was sort of an event more so. It was a night out. I don't think that's the case as much for the sort of the generation that's under 20. Under 30.
Well, let's face it. What industry has not been disrupted by the likes of competing services, whether it's through the gig economy, whether it's through kind of more nimble platforms. Is it not just a case of the cinema operators, like so many other industries, need to evolve to be part and to be competitive? So what do you imagine is the kind of strategies that are being discussed within the cinema business?
Look, there's the Australian Cinemas Association, or the group, which doesn't involve all the independents. The independents are happy to take the 30-day window. Yep. They're saying, we're happy for 30 days, but we're up 30 than none. Look, I think they need to come and understand that online's it's not something that's just going to come and go. It's just going to grow and grow. They did it years ago with TV, that the TV was the end and the doom of cinema, and it wasn't the case. But they did complain about the old box, that's and the department stores and all the shopping stores and the bricks and mortar that we worry about online shopping. Well, you just got to learn, okay, I've got to adjust and change and work along and be a part of the online phenomenon, rather than say, no, I'm not willing to play, and it's got to be this way because this is how it's always been. I
know that News Breakfast were touching on this similar issue. I don't know whether it was apropos of The Irishman, but the kind of big question about how cinemas need to evolve. Can you imagine cinemas actually creating a service that is at a cheaper price to draw more audience to the cinema itself?
Look, if you've got an independent film that's a low budget, you're not going to have a massive marketing. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be very hard for you to sort of negate your way into those cinemas, and they'll determine when your time slot is, and it will the big blockbusters will always take preference in the main time streaming. So it's not very supportive of that, of what we call your independent. Let's call it independent cinema. Your low budget independent cinema. So I think that's where they've got to embrace these lower budget genre-based films, like what we're working on now with Real House Productions. They've got to really understand. Okay, we need to be a part of that. We need to sort of help that and promote independent directors, independent movies, genre-based, and sort of do we sort of have a different scale system for those? How do we make it available and actually get that audience back into the cinemas?
The other thing that's been happening, and I'll just remind people that you're with David Astle on ABC Evenings, and I'm chatting to Tony Nikolakopoulos, who is an Aussie actor, but also involved in a production house. It's Real
House Productions.
Say again, sorry?
Real House Productions.
Real House Productions. Is there a pun in there? R-E-E-L?
R-E-E-L as in...
All right, yeah, I just got you there. Real House Productions, and which essentially works between these spaces of mainstream release as well as platform release, Netflix, Stan, Apple TV and the rest of it. Tony, is it... I'm looking at the sorts of projects that are being funded at the moment. I noticed that Tony Ayres, who's a well-known director, he's teamed up with Christian White, the novelist, to produce Clickbait for Netflix. Yep. I also noticed that Zach Hilditch, the Perth director, has signed up for a horror film called Rattlesnake. Again, I think it's with Netflix. It's in a way, it's looking to me like TV or streaming TV has almost become the new cinema.
Look, definitely, there's a lot of traction with the TV or the episodic series with Netflix and the sort of Australian content that's being made through Netflix Australia. As far as feature films sort of scenarios, that still hasn't come into sort of great fruition. But I think that's the way it's heading now. I mean, Screen Australia will then need to see how they play in that market as well, and whether they sort of come on board and support that area of the industry. It's definitely the future, and we can't deny it. That's where it's going. It's a $1 billion industry. The likes of Netflix and Stan and Google, and they got Disney that's got their own channel now, and Facebook's launching.
Yeah, look, you're right, but I'm looking at the metrics, it's 11 million households, 11 million subscribers, that's the Netflix alone. But if you do the maths on that, let's say it's to a household of average size of 3 people, it's essentially most of us have got access to these sorts of services. Is that... why is it taken till now, in a way, to be more provocative about this issue, for a film like The Irishman to push the envelope? It seems as almost there's been this very polite standoff for almost 10 years when it could have happened sooner.
Oh, I think with Scorsese, he tried to go to the different studios, and his budget was way too high. No one was willing to take the risk, and Netflix were the only ones that were willing to take the financial risk, because they know that their worldwide subscriber base, would be able to cover those. Well, if not cover those costs, it would increase their subscribers. So, if something like The Irishman increased their subscribers for a 3-month period, even 2-month period, we're talking, hundreds and hundreds of millions.
Yeah, in fact, it could well be a loss leader. Getting more people to the service. Yeah. So, when was the last time you went to the cinema, Tony?
I took my 17-year-old last week.
Yeah.
To see Joker. There were 6 people in the cinema. Which I was really, it was a late session, but it was, I enjoy watching a film. I don't think, the last thing I want is for cinema to go away, because I love the experience of the big screen and the surround sound and munching on a bit of popcorn and watching a film, depending on the film, of course. I don't think we should ever lose that experience, but it's about, I think, cinema and the online phenomenon need to work together, and that's what what we're doing with Real House is we want to work with both mediums. It's not about being exclusive to one.
So, how can you play both ends of the room? What sorts of deals or strategies are Real House and other production houses opting for?
Well, look, Joel Edgerton's latest film, The King.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it, but I'm aware of it. Yeah.
He had the minimal cinema release that would sort of allow it to qualify. But after the film prior to that, which I forgot, it's called The Boy, I forgot the name of it now.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Where they lost a lot of money, didn't get the audiences they want because they didn't have the marketing budget, didn't get the cinema slot times. He swore that he would never make another feature film for cinema again. He would, he's happy to work within the online platform because he's allowed to make what he wants to make, how he makes it. He's allowed to have the actors that he wants to work with. And so you've got that flexibility where, when you're working with the likes of, certain cinema groups, there's obviously distributors that get involved, and there's a lot of people that are sort of having their input and taking their piece of the pie. So there's a lot less left for you at the end for the person that's creating the product.
And it seems as though, I'm also looking at not just directors but actors as well. The Coen brothers have produced The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Sandra Bullock, Meryl Streep, Jason Bateman, Laura Linney, Eric Banner, and Dirty John. It seems as though Hollywood has moved to the streaming platform as well.
Well, I think it's because the streaming platform is willing to take what I would call a calculated risk, because they know what their target market wants, because they've got information on everyone they've got enough information on everyone that watches specific shows and what they like to watch. So therefore, they know. For example, Sandra Bullock's The Bird Box. Had 90 million viewers.
Yeah.
So they know lead female, Sandra Bullock's popular. They love that thriller, horror-esque style of film. So they know that anything within that genre, it's worth taking a punt on, because it's a sort of a calculated risk.
It's, what you're describing essentially has become a new, it's a new battleground. I think there's been this sort of long time stasis that the likes of Gold Cinema or IMAX has tried to extend or at least maintain, and suddenly there's a kind of new Godzilla in the city called streaming services. And it's great to talk to someone like you who's nimble enough with Real House Productions to work between the two. It seems as though all parties need to play that kind of binary game. It is
a total binary game, because look, what we're focused on at Real House is genre-based, low budget. The ability to introduce new emerging actors and actors that haven't necessarily had their big breaks, so they're not household names, because there's some amazingly talented actors out there. And the same with emerging directors. And then there's the directors that have been, left on the shelf, because they're considered too old. It's about creating a lot more work within the industry. There's designers, sound designers. There's so many people that are hungry and love that medium of making film and telling story through film. And it's regardless of what its genre base is, there's something very special about making a film, but then you want to see it. You want it to have a bit of a life. And,
exactly.
And too
also,
many times Australian films don't get that life because you've got to watch them at 11 a.m. on a Monday morning.
okay, which is, let's face it, that's just sacrilege right there.
Yeah.
Look, Tony, thank you for joining us tonight, and thanks for highlighting this space.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Tony Nikolakopoulos, and if you want to find out more, The Real House Productions is where he's involved, and the film that we have been talking about, which is due for release on mainstream cinemas, but not every cinema because of this boycott by some of the big players. It's called The Irishman, and is Martin Scorsese's kind of pet project with his long history of mafia films, from Goodfellas included. This is all come about because of this one film that has squashed the 90-day window. It's 5 minutes to 10 o'clock, and that squashes Rod Dick